In the last video, we looked at how to go through your sources and find the media you actually want to import. And in our case, we're going to import everything from this overtime folder, but you'll want to make a selection of the media you're actually importing. And make sure you do that first before you go over to the right column and select all of the options. If you did not see a source that you're importing from and you have some questions, I strongly recommend going into the Final Cut Pro Help menu. And when you click on Help, you're going to click on this Final Cut Pro 10 Help option. This will let you search through the manual that's included with Final Cut Pro, and it covers each of the sources in a lot more detail. So if you're importing from an older video camera or another source that I did not list or cover here, definitely look into that manual or send an email to FinalCutProHelp@me.com, and I'll do my best to help out and take you through those steps. However, if you've made a selection for what you want to import, it's now time to verify the options on the right side are set the way you want them to be. The first thing is, what do you want to do with this media? Where do you want to actually put it? You can either add it to an existing event or create a new event, because every piece of media you import into Final Cut has to be stored in an event. You can't put it directly in a library or directly into a project. It has to be linked to an event. And so we created our event in a previous video and we called it the overtime event, and that's exactly where I want this media to go. I can even click on this and verify that it's in the overtime library, which I see it is at the top there. However, if you're on the fly importing media, you may not have created that event, and if that's the case, just check this box to create a new event. You can see here it's going to create it in the overtime library, and you can give that event a name. But in our case, we're adding this all to this overtime event. Now below that, it asks us what we want to do with the files. And I made a brief mention of this in an earlier video, but I strongly recommend, if you're new to Final Cut, and especially new to organizing your clips, to let Final Cut do it for you. And that's going to be the copy to library option. And what that means is, in the Finder outside of Final Cut, it's going to store all of the files in the library. If you choose Leave Files in Place, that's going to leave the files, in this case on the desktop, or wherever they're currently stored. And Final Cut will make links to those files wherever they're stored. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. That's why this option is here. Many people use it. The problem is, if you're not used to how those links work and you don't have a solid understanding of that, it's very easy to move something, delete a file that Final Cut is still using. And then you're going to get a media offline, or the media is unavailable. You're going to get a big red screen that comes up. And it's okay if you know how to manually manage stuff. You can relink those files pretty easily. But if you don't want to have to deal with that, if you'd rather Final Cut do it for you, and that's what I recommend early on, is leave this option set to copy to library. If you have a different way of organizing media, or maybe a different situation, definitely don't hesitate. You can send an email to FinalCutProHelp@me.com, and we can discuss this a little bit further and reasons you may want to use Leave Files in Place. But for early on, if you're new to Final Cut, just keep this set to copy to library. The next area is keywords. Finder has some cool features where you can actually tag items to organize files, as opposed to just putting them in folders and doing other options. But either way, if you use tags or you have a whole folder structure, which we do here in this overtime library, we can actually have keywords set automatically based on those tags and the folders these files are stored in. So in my case, I am going to keep both of those options enabled or checked off. And the other part of this, tags and folders are going to be converted into keywords, Final Cut keywords, and it's very easy to delete those keywords. So I usually recommend, regardless of how you're organizing, to keep those options checked, and if you decide the keyword's not something you need, you can go and delete that. The next part of it is asking about audio roles. And roles is a feature that allows you to organize your timeline and sort through content. It's a very powerful feature for organizing. And if you have equipment that, when the audio was recorded, assigns specific metadata to different tracks, Final Cut can interpret that and assign roles based on that information. That's a little bit beyond what this course is going to cover, but you can leave this enabled, and if you have content that and media that has the names available to be able to convert that, Final Cut can take care of that feature for you. The next couple options you'll see are all unchecked, both under Transcoding and Analyze and Fix. And we're going to go through these and take a look at this. The first one is, how do you want to transcode the media? By default, Final Cut is just going to import all this content. It's not going to create optimized media, and it's not going to create proxy media. So why would you want to create either of those? Well, in both cases, you are creating content, so it's going to take up more storage on your computer or your storage drive. But optimized media is usually as good as quality as you can get. It's full quality media, but it's optimized to work with Final Cut. So when we look at adding effects, titles, and other things down the road, a lot less rendering has to happen when you're using optimized media. So depending on the type of camera that you're recording from, it may be very helpful to create optimized media. However, with that said, there is an option to create proxy media, which is still pretty good quality as far as I'm concerned. It still looks really well. It is lower quality as far as everything's concerned, but it is a smaller file. So especially if you're working on a slower computer or a MacBook Pro, for example, their laptops, they have a lot of power, but they're not designed to edit, say, 4K, a really high-end quality video. So creating proxy media can really help out in the speed and performance of your computer. So I don't recommend necessarily jumping to creating optimized media, but usually proxy media is great to have. So I like to check off this box for create proxy media. And as long as you have plenty of storage space, there's nothing to be concerned about storage-wise. But this will allow us to take advantage of some performance features we're going to see later inside of Final Cut. And then the final list of options are ways for Final Cut to automatically analyze your clips and do things with them, depending on the type of video and the types of clips that you have here. So we're not going to dive too deep into this because all of these options you can analyze and fix later. You can also transcode proxy media later on if you wanted to. I like to do it during the import. But the rest of these options I usually keep unchecked. You can go through and hover over any of these options to see more of a detailed description of what they're going to do. But I usually keep these unchecked for now, and we're going to dive into those features a little bit later. The final thing at the bottom we looked at before, we have import all because nothing's selected, so everything that's listed here Final Cut's going to try to import. But there's also a checkbox here that says close window after starting the import. So if you're going through and selectively importing clips, it might be a good idea to uncheck this box. That way you can start importing 2 or 3 clips, look for some other ones, and import those as well. But in this case, I'm ready to go. I want to import everything here. I've looked at my options on the right side. Everything looks good, so we're ready to actually import this content. So to start the import, you're going to hit the Import All button. You'll know the import has started because we see something happening in our background task window. And that's the window that's located at the top left of Final Cut. You'll see it's added our clips. We can actually start going through and doing things. But this little button at the top left is your background tasks window button. And if you click on this button, you'll be able to see what's happening in the background of Final Cut. And this may be rendering, it may be transcoding the media into those proxies files, all kinds of things. In our case, right now it's importing the files, and I can see it's going through and copying those into the library. And if I go up to the Transcoding and Analyst, I can see it's going through and working through all of those clips as well to create the proxy files. So pretty cool that you can monitor all this through the background tasks window. I'm going to close this window now. This little circle, it's going to be a little pie that starts to fill up as the media gets imported. But you don't need to wait for this to finish. You can start editing and working with your footage while Final Cut is working in the background. That's a huge feature, huge time saver. You don't have to wait for all that stuff to go through, and it'll start importing it for us. So in the next video, we're going to take a look at some preferences, and then we're actually going to start to organize this content.